Back to Advance Your Wealth with Homer Smith. I am your moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to be back with everybody on the show today. And as always, I'm going to be joined by my right hand man, Homer Smith, private wealth advisor. And we're going to be diving into another big wealth management topic today. If you're a frequent viewer or listener of the show, you know Homer and I explore a lot of challenges surrounding family wealth. And today, we're going to be diving into some of the challenges of giving and receiving family wealth. And let's just kind of open up today's conversation. Simply having significant wealth in today's day and age doesn't necessarily guarantee anybody a great life. For example, there are a lot of inheritors out there that face a number of pretty significant challenges at various points in their lives, whether that be the years leading up to receiving the inheritance or even as the wealth is transferred to them. So Homer and I are going to be identifying what some of these challenges are for in the mind of an inheritor of giving and receiving wealth, but we're also going to identify some different strategies to help overcome what some of these challenges are. So with that being said, let's go ahead and bring him out. Homer, good to see you today. How you doing? I'm excited for today's conversation.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I am too, and I think this falls in line with a lot of the discussions we've been having lately, and even really a lot of the work that we do for our clients. What we're really known for, more than anything else, is helping successful families and business owners navigate life's most important and complex transitions, whether that's transitioning from owner operator to owner and just taking a step back from the day-to-day operations of the business, or beginning to think about the transfer of that business either internally to the management team or to the next generation if it's a family business, or even thinking about that transition to an outside buyer. And then finally, a lot of the work we do is around how our families think about transitioning their wealth to the next generation and their heirs in a way that's positive and impactful and not destructive. And that's really what today is all about, and how,
Mhm.
unfortunately, too often, while it might seem great to receive all this wealth, it can often lead to challenges that people don't think about. And so I know it seems like a good problem to have, but it actually can be pretty significant.
Of course, no, and I mean, I also, Homer, I think most people would agree that look, having a level of wealth is better than not having a wealth. But I know you and your team don't view it as black and white like that. There are challenges that exist for the people that are receiving wealth, as well as those that are giving wealth. That they have to navigate during that process. Set the scene for today's conversation, if you will.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, wealth doesn't automatically mean a good or healthy life. And I think it's important for members of both sides, the older generation that's going to be transferring the wealth and the heirs that are going to be receiving those assets, to be thoughtful about how this occurs, and to be careful, at times. And by acting now, and communicating and getting together as a family and really thinking through these issues, uh, it's definitely going to help give the family a better chance of avoiding the pitfalls that oftentimes inheritors find themselves in, and really more effectively deal with the concerns that could arise down the road.
Well, let's double click into this for a second, Homer. What are some of those pitfalls that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so if we start with the older generation, affluent parents and grandparents are very concerned about the negative impact that significant wealth can have on their kids or their grandkids. And one study even showed that 70% of this first generation or the older generation is concerned about leaving too much money to their heirs. They're worried that it's a couple of things. One, that it might create trust fund babies, lazy or irresponsible inheritors. The other side of it is, if they have members of their family, their heirs, that today don't make good financial decisions, or aren't yet mature enough to make good financial decisions, or have some sort of addiction, whether it's drug addiction, gambling, whatever it might be, the receipt of the wealth in the wrong way can actually enhance the challenges they're already facing and actually make it dangerous for them. So that's the one side of it. And then on the inheritor side themselves, if it's especially if the wealth comes unexpectedly, and this good fortune was on the back end of a family member or a dearly loved one dying too early, they often can have a lot of stress, and also can become a target, to where other friends or other more distant family members, even strangers, can become significant sources of stress um, for having this considerable wealth. Everybody has a great idea for an investment, or needs a small loan right now, or even looking for a handout, and all of the sudden this can become overwhelming and very stressful for those inheritors.
Of course, and given the complexity of not only those challenges, Homer, but just financial topics to discuss overall, where do families begin, honestly, to start navigating these types of challenges that are associated with wealth transfer, so that they have those issues you just mentioned in mind as they begin this process?
The first step for each family is to recognize the challenges that the inheritors are likely to face, and be on the lookout for them as a family. Every family is different, and each of the inheritors is going to be different. So not necessarily creating just a blanket approach to how they think about this, but really looking at each member of the family, and how their unique characteristics and issues are going to be impacted. The one area that we often see is the largest challenge or issue for that next generation is a lack of financial knowledge. Um, they often, well, at least in our experience with the families we deal with, most of the wealth was often created by a founder business owner. And oftentimes, as they were building that business from scratch, they themselves didn't have a lot of wealth. So their kids and maybe even grandkids did not grow up with significant wealth, and so there wasn't really a lot of sharing and knowledge around how to manage money, and being good about that was really delivered throughout the family. And so all of a sudden they can receive this significant amount of wealth and they weren't prepared for it. And so that I think is probably the one issue that we face the most. And again, it can lead to a lot of other problems. Either they can have some level of fear about what all this money means to them, and again, as we mentioned earlier, it could lead to a lot of, I would say, unscrupulous people seeking to take advantage of that wealth.
Sure thing, Homer. So you mentioned this idea of a lack of financial knowledge. What other challenges or big red flags do you see often rear their head in instances like these?
Yeah, of course. The one that I think most people see most often is bad spending habits. Most people, who live paycheck to paycheck, that then inherit money, this is just a much bigger paycheck than they've ever had, and so they don't necessarily change their habits, and so they often can overspend, and basically take this significant wealth, and diminish it very quickly and be right back where they started within a couple of years. On the flip side of that, though, is even for those family members who don't necessarily spend it down, but they now just have more money to spend, and they oftentimes people think, okay, just more money means I can buy my happiness. If they're not really thinking about their values and how they're spending this money in a way that's ultimately going to lead to the outcome that they want, which is greater happiness and a more meaningful life, if they're just spending to spend and think all these great things are going to lead to that, they can end up with a rude awakening when 2 years later they have all this great stuff and they're not any happier in their lives. Um, it can also lead to a lot of additional guilt and low self-esteem, um, and anxiety around this money. They don't know who they are, when they don't have any money, and now they have all of this money, and same thing, they're still not really prepared for what this means to them. And we can often see them ending up in this idea of this imposter syndrome, where they live in a world which they feel they don't really belong in, because they never were used to having that kind of wealth growing up, and they really, again, don't have a clear sense of self, even with all this found wealth.
Yeah, and these aren't challenges that are easy to navigate by any means. I mean, sure, there's the planning on the front end that can be done, and that's where I'm taking this conversation, Homer. But once you become victim, kind of dealing with these challenges, I mean, it's tough to face when you're in the moment. But on the front end, Homer, what can families be doing specifically in this regard to take proactive steps to avoid some of the challenges you just mentioned? Because that's really where the answer ultimately lies here.
Yeah, good question. So the families that we've seen navigate this most successfully really focus on honing in on financial decision making skills across the family. So between and amongst generations. So as early as kids, grandkids get very involved in financial decision makings for the family, whether it's through a family foundation or whether it's just doing regular family meetings where the generation that has created the wealth or has the wealth is whether it's bringing additional professionals into the mix as well to help uh, teach some of those skills to the younger generations, but really having that ability from a very early age to start to understand how the money works. And more, I think, just as important, if not more important, is not just teaching kids about money and money making decisions, but it's transferring the values from that older generation that created the wealth down to those next generations, and what was important to them about building that wealth. And those are, I would say, the things that we've seen that the most successful families do in order to start bridging some of that gap.
And the gaps there are bridged over kind of those technical challenges. But Homer, what about some of the emotional challenges that you mentioned a moment ago? Any advice on, let's say, an heir dealing with some of those emotional challenges? Let's say in the event where there was that inheritance that came on the back end of maybe a family death per se.
Yeah, I'd say that you want to, number one, you want to feel like you can share these challenges with others, and unfortunately, for a lot of these inheritors, they're in a position where it makes them harder to relate to their peers, their friends, and other people that were in their lives that were at their same socioeconomic level until they receive that inheritance, and all of a sudden they now have all this wealth, and it puts them in a very different position than the lives that they were living prior to that, and so that can create this feeling of loneliness and isolation. Um, and so what we see again as something that is helpful to these families, number one, is if the family unit themselves prior to this inheritance is doing regular meetings and talking about the wealth and what it means and what their experiences are themselves with it. Because I think one of the things that we see happen in the families we deal with is that even those wealthy entrepreneurs that we work with, um, they themselves didn't have a lot of wealth until just recently. It was very much tied up in their business or real estate, and it's only when they have that liquidity event, typically in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, do all of a sudden they have this liquid wealth, which is very different. And so they're experiencing a lot of the same issues that their kids and grandkids will eventually experience. But are they really sharing that with those kids and helping them understand what they're going through and how they're dealing with it? And so one additional thing that I've seen help in these areas is there's networks of wealthy families, whether it's family business owner networks or just wealthy family networks that have networking groups where they're able to share a lot of these, because again, these are all really good problems to have as a family. We're not talking about the suffering that comes with not having money, but these are real issues, and there are networks out there of families going through these same problems and challenges, and it's been very helpful just to hear what are other families doing and experiencing to work through these same issues.
Yeah, being able to relate ever always so important. I mean, we do it a lot in our day-to-day lives among a variety of different issues. So why can't it be that way when it comes to wealth as well? Homer, I want to circle back to an earlier point that you made in terms of just being a good kind of steward and learning about wealth and honing your financial decision-making skills. Are there any other kind of action steps or pieces of advice you could offer to our audience for those that are looking for smart ways to be a good steward of their wealth, aside from just brushing up on the financial knowledge and things like that?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, stewardship is a word that many of the wealthy families we work with use, but I don't think it's acted on in the way that I would think about it necessarily as much. Stewarding wealth could simply just mean passively making sure the wealth is sustained for multiple generations. Um, the way I like to add in, and something we mentioned earlier, is not just passing this wealth down from one generation to the next, but also the family values. And most of the families I work with. Um, are first generation wealth creators and business owners, and so entrepreneurship is something that's very important to them, and so helping build a process into the family that can encourage entrepreneurship, and so that not only is it about sustaining the wealth, but actually could be about continuing to build the wealth of the family through entrepreneurship, whether it's bringing up these different generations in the family business and giving them roles to learn how to do that themselves, or even creating the idea of a family bank, which we spoke about in a previous episode, which also can encourage that entrepreneurship. So I think that's an important thing, is not just passing the wealth down, but those values. I want to be careful that not every person has the same goals and desire to be an entrepreneur. So I do think it's also, you want to be mindful of what you set up, so that that's not the only way they can contribute to the family wealth is being an entrepreneur themselves. But that's one example of a way that the families we work with want to encourage the
Hmm.
stewardship down different generations.
No, that's great, Homer. Look, I feel like there's this common theme among a lot of the conversations that we have on the show, and that is everyone's situation is unique, right? Your family wealth, the dynamics and challenges that you're exposed to, while they might be similar in some aspects to others, they are unique to you and your family. So, given that level of just variety, shall we say, of challenges and variables that can be at play when we're dealing with all these financial things, Homer, do you have any final advice or insights, or maybe just a bottom line for today's conversation for families that are looking to help address with the challenges of giving or receiving family wealth? Any sort of bottom line you want to leave our audience with today?
Sure. I think that being a little bit self-serving here is the work that we do in building this idea of a virtual family office around each of our clients, so that there's a coordination of experts that are always there to support and help the family is really important. The challenge that we see in these scenarios is that oftentimes the generation that inherits the wealth, I mean, it's a pretty in the studies that I've seen, it's a pretty high number of them want to strike it out on their own. So they want to hire a new professional, and really like, yeah, do their own thing and be independent from the things their parents did. And I fully support that if the especially if the professionals that were working with the family aren't aligned with their values and the things that they want to achieve. So really our focus is working with our clients is how can we build those connections with multiple generations so that we can be a good steward for that inheritor generation, because the professionals that have been working with the family for a very long time are often going to have a lot of insights and knowledge of the family values and of that inheritor themselves, and can be really a great resource to help them make sure they're building and navigating that wealth in a great way. Now, I'm not saying that again they should
Mhm.
necessarily stay with the family advisors, but having a group of advisors around you that you trust is really important. And this idea of a virtual family office being built around them, I think, is a really effective way to deal with that. And so that would
Mhm.
be my one recommendation. Whether you stick with the professionals that your family had prior, or whether you build a new one around your own, really think about this idea of a virtual family office as being an ideal way to structure that.
And Homer, if that's a newer concept out there to anybody in our audience, or they're interested in just learning more about it, or even just opening up a dialogue with you and your team to, talk through some of these challenges that we're mentioning today about family wealth, what would be the best way somebody can get a hold of you and just start that conversation?
Yeah, the best way always is through email, or you can go to our website and reach out and schedule a time to talk. And just again, I'm always happy to just have a conversation and see what makes sense and go from there.
Well, Homer, you're a busy guy. You've got a lot of clients to serve, so let's just get back to doing that. But I appreciate you carving some time out of your day to jump on here. I mean, family wealth, it's family, right? It's always emotional, it's sticky, it's important at the end of the day. And navigating some of these challenges could be some of the uh, biggest hurdles really to navigate as a family when significant wealth is on the table. So, Homer, I appreciate you. Looking forward to being back with you on the next one. Wish you the best in the coming days.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Good to see you.
Good to see you as always, Homer. And hey, folks, we're going to take one final moment, as we always do here on the show, and thank you guys for stopping by and spending some time with us. If you enjoyed today's conversation, or you took something away from it, you benefited from it in any way, shape, or form, make sure you hit that subscribe button then on whichever platform you checked us out on today. That way you don't miss out on a future conversation between Homer, myself, maybe one of our esteemed guests, where we dive into these different wealth management topics so that you and yours could come out better.